Hi, this is the Social Jello with Angelo show. My name's Angelo. I'm a social scientist, surfer, martial artist, and a whole lot of other things. Coming to you live from Kasai City, Japan, the Social Jello with Angelo show.
What's up, and welcome to another episode of Social Jello with Angelo. I'm here with Rick Metzler.
Yeah.
Metzler. Okay, there was an L there. And if you don't know who Rick is one of John Hackelman's students. And the title of this podcast is Surviving a Pro Fight Team. And let's just get a little bit started here. For those of you that, if this is your first episode, we need to go over a little tiny bit, not too much, just a little bit of history here. So what we're going to do, we're going to go here and we're going to show you who John Hackelman is. So here's John Hackelman. And John Hackelman is Chuck Liddell's coach. If you don't know who Chuck Liddell is, if you're living under a rock, he's coming from, he's a UFC champion, Hall of Fame UFC champion. Also, we have Glover Teixeira, another UFC champion. And they're coming out of a place called The Pit, as you can see on Rick's shirt. And Rick, are you a UFC champion?
Nope.
And that's why he's on the show. So when I first asked Rick to come on the show, he was like, I don't know, man. I'm not a UFC champion.
We need to get something straight here. I don't know what you heard.
Yeah, I don't know what your goals are or why you want me on the show. And then I told Rick, that's exactly why I want you on the show. Because most of you watching, I'm assuming most of you are not UFC champions. But if you ever end up in a situation, if you do martial arts, and maybe you're just starting and it's all new to you, and you're just kind of perusing the internet to see what's out there, you may end up, if you do this long enough, you're going to end up in a situation where you're training with people that are UFC champions or training to be UFC champions. Me personally, I've never trained with UFC champions, but I have trained with people that wanted to be UFC champions, and I've trained with local pro MMA circuits and stuff. And I'm not a pro fighter by any means either. I'm a retired MMA fighter. The most I ever did was amateur. I did a semi-pro fight at most. I know stuff about Rick that I'm not going to go into and let Rick talk about himself. But I will say that if you do this long enough, you will end up in situations where you're training people that want to be professional fighters. But maybe you personally, for your own reasons, are not a person. For me personally, I only can speak for myself. I never aspired to be a professional fighter. I got into this to defend myself. I grew up in a rough neighborhood, and I wanted to make sure I could protect myself. And then later, when I started a family, I wanted to protect my family, and that was pretty much it. I always say I think I did overkill on that goal. I know a lot more than I needed to know to accomplish the goal of protecting myself when I started training with people that wanted to be professional fighters, because that's a different level of training. So the question to you average viewer, how would you survive that situation, right? So I wanted Rick to come on here because he was there at the Pit from day one in 1987.
Summer of 87, yeah.
Since 1987. And as John told me, there were plenty of times where he just wasn't sure if Rick was going to survive, but Rick just kept coming back. So Rick, how did that work, man? How did you get into martial arts? Let's start with the basic question that I ask everybody. What made you want to get
into martial arts? Fourth grade, 9 years old, getting picked on by a sixth grader. Probably a really familiar story with a lot of us. Dad went and bought some boxing gloves. My parents were split up, so the time he spent helping me learn how to defend myself with the boxing gloves was on one of the 2 weekends that I saw him a month. So it was special in that sense, bonding and all that with the father and son. But he gave me some confidence, and for months, I don't know, it might have been 2 weeks, but it seemed like 6 months that this sixth grader was telling me that I was dead meat, that I was dust. And he had the biggest group of friends in school. It was me and my two friends, and he had like, a whole posse of like 10 or 20, and they were all older. So to a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old seems like a freaking adult. And And then after I did some training with my dad, I had enough confidence to just call him out, because every day he was saying, "You're dead today, you're dead today." And then nothing would happen. I'd go home, crying and upset. And then one day, after building my confidence up with my Big 5 boxing gloves on the lawn with my dad on his knees, I finally said, "You keep saying that you're going to kick my butt. I'll keep it rated G. When are you going to do it? You keep saying you're going to do it. When are you going to do it?" And what I didn't realize I did then, I wasn't doing it on purpose. I called him out in front of all his friends, and he was really a wimp. He was really, he was scary to me, but in hindsight, looking at it, this many years, 48 years later, he was really a scared kid. Who knows what was happening to him in his life at home? Who knows what he was dealing with, where he felt he needed to tell me that he was going to kick my butt every day. But I called him out in front of his friends. And so he said, "Fine, at the church, under the cross, after school." And it was set. Everyone heard it, and it was set.
Under the cross.
Yeah, under the cross. The cross is still there. The church is still there, and I still live in the same town. But his whole group marched down one side of the street, and I marched down the other side with my 2 friends, and we met under the cross. And then he didn't want to do anything because he didn't want to get in trouble. He said, "I'm not going to throw the first punch. I don't want to get in trouble." I said, "Well, you said I was dead meat. You said you're going to kill me." So, whatever I said as a 9-year-old. And then he pushed me. And as soon as he pushed me, I just screamed, "That's a punch." And I just went after him. And then it got broke up, and I broke my thumb, because this is a lesson that all my students they hear this story. My dad, I had boxing gloves on. What's the first thing you do when you have kids and you have to teach them? Right? They all want to make fists like this.
Yeah. Mm.
No one knows. And my dad didn't teach me that. So I broke my thumb on his head, but it was worth it. It was a splint of pride, going back to school. And everyone, of course, knew that I kicked his butt, and he never bothered me. He had to face me. And back then, I had a lot of pride in it, of course. Now, as a parent and a teacher, I really do wonder, like, what happened in his life where he had to do that. But for me, what it did for me was, it obviously imprinted on me, and I started looking at different martial arts schools. I took Shotokan at the local community center. I did some Tang Soo Do around 12, 13. I did some Kung Fu Sansu like the year before I met John. And then when I turned 18 and got out of high school, I knew that I needed something that was gonna put a requirement on me. I was doing things that probably weren't the healthiest things to do, and I wanted something that was gonna keep me where I knew I needed to be. I wanted some discipline. And of course, I could have done anything. You can get discipline out of practicing how to play guitar, right? But I wanted that. I wanted that that martial arts gives us, where it gives us the confidence. It gives us all the things. But I didn't know it then. I didn't know when I was searching, when I was looking for a school and looking for a John. I didn't know that's what I was looking for. But now, in retrospect, I can look back and realize that's what I was looking for.
And so, how old were you when you ended up meeting John? You came in already with a base of some martial arts there that you just mentioned.
A little bit, so. But I was 18 when I met John.
Okay.
Yeah.
And who was there when you walked in? What students were training with him at the time?
God. So there were no no internet, no cell phones, right? A Thomas guide. I don't know if you remember the Thomas guide.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if that.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so
we gotta break this down though. For you,
there was a thing called a phone book, and there was a thing called a
Thomas guide. So this Thomas guide, before GPS, if you wanted to find something, before MapQuest, oh God. Right. So there was this book that you had to buy, and if you had to drive anywhere, you had a state and a county version depending on how it worked. The state version would give you the broader roads, and you had the county version that would give you the smaller roads. Usually had 2 of them, because I used to drive a tow truck around the same time.
Yeah, okay.
Right. I had to have them. You had to have them. I had to have a list of them.
You can get fast at them too, right?
You get pretty quick. But it was a book, and you had to actually find the roads. So it
Yeah.
wasn't as simple as just as oh man, as just what you can do nowadays. So okay, I'm done with my
So
Gen X rant there.
so I had made a list of 5 karate schools that I wanted to go check out just based on the ads in the phone book. Um, I was living in the valley, which is the San Fernando Valley. I currently live in the Conejo Valley, which is about 30 miles away, and I grew up out here. But at the time, I was living in the San Fernando Valley, um, and so and I kind of knew the area. My dad was living down there, and um, I wrote down a list of 5 places and I went to all of them. And I called each of them ahead of time to make sure that they would be ready for me to come down, that it'd be okay. What, what should I do, whatever. And when I called John, he just answered the phone. Oh, I said, yeah, is this John the trained Hackelman Karate? He goes, yeah, who is this? How'd you get my number? It's a landline, right? Because there's no cell phones. I'm like, it's in the phone book. No, it's not. Yeah, it is. It's in the phone book. That's how I called you. I'm looking at the phone book. I have the book open and I called it and I'm talking to you. All right, whatever. What do you want? Well, do you do karate, right? Yeah, I do karate. What do you want? Well, I just want to see if I can come in and train. Yeah, I don't care. Do whatever. Okay, so what time? I don't know, 6 o'clock, something like that. Okay. So that's all I know, right? So I go to the 4 other schools and they're like neon light blinking, like, karate, sign up here, free uniform, the whole 9 yards. And I go to those other 4 schools and I'm looking at my Thomas guide and I'm trying to find this address on De La Osa. And I don't recognize the street. So it's not like a main street where there's stores and shops and stuff. And the Thomas guide takes me to this residential neighborhood. Well, he never said that it was at a house. He never said, so I'm walking down the street. Now it's nighttime and I'm walking down the street, like kind of quietly, not sure where I'm going to go, looking for something that says karate here with an arrow or something. And it's a nice neighborhood, so I'm not worried about getting shot that bad, but I'm still creeping. And I hear bags, I hear things getting pounded. I hear bag work and kicking shields and things like that, people grunting and stuff. But I still don't know how to get in. I knock on the door, no one answers because they're all in the back. And so I open the side gate. The dogs greet me at the side gate, Buffy and Caboose, and the Cocker Spaniel and a Golden Retriever. And it was Caboose because John's fight name was the train. So I walk in the backyard. I'm wearing like Levi's and some sort of t-shirt and a leather jacket because it was nighttime. It was cool. And same John, he's like, who are you? I'm like, I'm the guy that called. He knew who I was, but he's like, I'm the guy that called. He's like, are you gonna train or what? I'm like, yeah, what do you want me to do? He points to the Stairmaster and he goes, get on that. Like, okay. So I get on the Stairmaster and I'm dying. I'm dying. Like I haven't done any kind of training like this. I'm dying. And it seemed like forever. I don't know how long. I tell everyone 45 minutes. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was 20 minutes. Maybe it was 10 minutes. I have no idea. We did a bunch of push-ups and squats. I don't know if we
wait.
that.
So were you still wearing the leather jacket? In the leather jacket?
Sure I can take it off. Don't get that image. The image is already bad enough. Like, oh, I might have tried to keep it on at some point, but I'm sure I took it off. I don't know if we sparred that day or not. John might remember better, but but in the early, like within the first week, yeah, and he probably told you, yeah, but here's the thing and this is something that I thought I got the shit beat out of it. That's a long story short, but the thing is, and when you started talking in the opening, it made me think about it. And I talked to my students about it because this is my experience. I found out years later, like probably after I got my black belt, that I found out maybe 10 or 15 years later what was going on in John's head at the time. Because I didn't know that he'd walk inside and tell his wife at the time, I don't like this guy. I'm gonna make sure he doesn't come back. I something about him. And this is what I've been told. I wasn't there to hear the conversation, but he's like, yeah, I don't know why. I just didn't like you. The hair, the jacket, whatever. You're like all rock and roll, and I didn't like you. I'm like, okay. He's like, but you stuck around, so then I liked you, you know. But he didn't want me to come back, I don't think, and he could speak to it himself. Um, but oh, that's what I was thinking when you started the opening thing. So much of it is perspective. Like if he would have said, "Hey, I don't freaking like you," you know, I think that you're this, you think you're that, I wouldn't have come back because I'm up for challenges, but I don't want to be disliked, you know. I wasn't looking for a place to be disliked. He never conveyed that he didn't like me. He never conveyed that he didn't want me back or that he didn't think I would come back. That was never conveyed to me. Um, I guess he was trying to convey it by beating the shit out of me, but I just thought I sucked. So it's perspective. I knew that I didn't know how to fight. I knew that I wasn't as good as him or a lot of the guys there. So I just thought like, oh man, I'm out of shape and I don't have any skills. I suck bad. I really need to do this. So it just made me want it more, you know. The people that were there, Rich was there, a guy named Rich Cluck. Brian was there, calm little Brian. Um, but no one that's still been a part of the pit for a long time. Everyone that was there then, they're still friends, and you know they're still really special to me and to John, I'm sure, but they're not involved with the pit.
And then, so you get in there, you never caught on that he didn't like you. You just felt like
Uh,
you just felt like he's just putting you through the grinder.
when I
And
mean I had played football in high school and gone through Hell Week and stuff, so I knew what it was like to pay your dues. I wasn't that naive, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Um, but no, I didn't hear that story that I just shared with you until like a decade or two after when we could all laugh about it. Yeah.
So, but either way, you stuck around, you're training. Um, as you're training, yeah, again, your goal in the beginning was to be able to defend yourself, and then you were looking for a school to continue that goal of defending yourself. And I guess my question is when you got there, were people already competing? Because obviously John was already competing because he had a name for himself, the Train.
Yeah.
And so this
There's a
is
guy with a blower across the street. Can you hear that? Is it annoying to you?
no, I don't hear it.
No. Okay.
The audio is being cut out is filtering it out, so you should be good.
Okay. Um. John was fighting. Um. When I first started there, we had some schools that we went and did little tournaments at that we normally wanted to go a little harder than the other people at the tournaments. We get in trouble for, you know, going too hard to the face and stuff like that. But no, the other thing that I've shared is what I realize now is we were there like we were just moving heavy bags for John because he was still competing. You know, he was still a North American heavyweight champion. He even had fights after that, you know. Um, and that was before what is now the fight team, you know. Sometimes we say like since I'm still a part of it and I did fight, we can say like, oh, okay, I was the first part of the fight team. But um but it was all John back then.
All right. So John was competing at that point. And
What's that? Yeah.
so John's competing at that point. You're training. How and how did you end up did when you got into it, were you getting into it to compete? Like or you were just getting into like I said, okay, yeah, just to defend yourself. So how did
It wasn't it was to have a demand put on me that I knew would keep me healthy. It wasn't even I know looking back on it now, I had aggression that I needed to direct. I didn't know that then. I was just drawn to it. I was drawn to it the way you could be drawn to a pretty lady or good music or whatever. I was just drawn to it. Um, I didn't question why. I was just drawn to martial arts. I could have done anything. Looking back on it, I can dissect interaction with my dad and the event with that guy, and I can do all that and understand why. But I didn't want to compete. I never really even liked competing, to tell you the truth. Um, I like competing. Competing was a byproduct and a necessary event when you wanted to keep challenging yourself. You know, to go up against someone that you didn't know what kind of shape they were going to be in. You didn't know their speed, their strength, their techniques, to simulate having to step up and match your skills and everything else against someone else. That's kind of the only way you can do it. And I used to say I would have been just as happy with me and the competitor, my opponent, just saying, hey, let's just go in the back room. We'll both know who won. It doesn't need to be in front of everyone. No one needs, like, let's just go do it back here. I would have been fine doing that. I didn't actually enjoy doing it in front of people.
And so when did and when you went in again, it sounded like it was everyone was kind of at the same mindset. John was the only one really competing at the time. How did you handle, obviously there must have been a transition. How many people were in that school when you walked in? Like 5? And it wasn't
maybe.
And it was like a garage. Like from the sounds of it, it wasn't even like I said, it was no neon lights. It's not the pit that everyone knows right now, like a giant facility with bags.
It started in the 1-car garage like the year or two before, and then when I got there, it had just been moved from the 1-car garage into a 3-sided kind of like lean-to that was like 300 square feet.
Yeah, so it was still on
with an outdoor patio with some weights and stuff.
It was still on the property then, right? So like,
yeah.
So you're sitting there, and how was that transition when you started realizing, hey, these people are competing, these people are fighting, like we're sparring, we're defending ourselves, but you're starting to go out and they're actually competing. You realize, oh, they're competing, and there's this competition element. How did you process all that?
I think I was kind of clueless in a way, because I would just do what John told me to do, like we'd be sitting somewhere and he'd say, hey, grab your stuff, you're gonna go fight, and I wouldn't know anything about it, and seriously, and we would go, and it would be a smoker or something at a auditorium or something, and then you'd fight, and that was that way. It was that way all the way through, like from the old days all the way through with Chuck. Like I remember I remember John did that one time with me, and I didn't know who was coming. I didn't know who was coming to the thing, and I thought we were doing like a demonstration or something. I didn't know I was fighting, and then Chuck showed up. And Chuck shows up and he's like, he had just eaten a bunch of Mexican food. He was still chowing on a burrito. And John goes, hey, yeah, you're fighting too. And Chuck looks at me, and I said, I just found out too. No one knew. He's like, oh, I just ate so much food. All right. That's how it was. That's how it was before everything like went up to another notch or 2 or 10. That's how it was. You just did what you were told, and John knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing. Maybe he knew. Maybe, I don't know. There's different ways to look at it. Maybe he knew if he told us we'd get nervous. Maybe he didn't know if there were going to be fights, so why put us through that if he didn't know? Or maybe he wanted to see how we handled the shock of being told you're fighting on like last. Who knows? And those would all be good questions for him. Maybe he'd probably just be, I don't know, I remember a long time ago. But I don't know. But that's how it was.
Okay, so what was it like to go from this small garage team? Not even team, more like a small family. And for those of you that do martial arts now, like I relate to this story. This is for those of you people that don't know what Kajikembo is, at the end of this is a Kajikembo podcast. You can check it out. The guy we're talking about, John Heikelman, I interview him. We talk about this stuff. But this is a very Kajikembo story, because like, if you talk to any Kajikembo guy, at one point you trained at a garage, like.
And I did it with my students.
Like you still do.
I did it with my students. I did the same thing. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Even people see my school that I have, and it's in the inside it's a full-on gym. On the outside, everything you just described is exactly like I'm in a residential area. I don't have a sign. I finally put up a tiny sign. If you look for it, it'll have this logo, and it's like in the corner of the building. But if you looked at the property, you'll see a house and a giant warehouse and an office building where my English school is. So you actually will not see the gym. From the outside, you don't really know it's a gym. It's very much on the outside looks like a garage, but on the inside looks like a regular, like, your regular martial arts gym from the inside. But on the outside, it doesn't look like it at all. So like, if you talk to any other Kajikembo guy, you'll find a lot of people training out of garages. When I started in a smaller garage. When I started doing my martial arts training, Nah, my instructor was in a studio, but I did a lot of the training in his backyard. So like again, new generation martial artists are used to these giant facilities now. Like
Right.
it's like
Right.
everywhere they go is like a giant. Everything has that like that tailored look with a cage and whatnot.
Well,
But
you need to have a big enough place to generate to have enough bodies in there to pay the rent and all that. So that, yeah, it's a whole
yeah,
deal.
but for you, what was it like? Maybe you said you were clueless. Did you ever catch on like when stuff started getting bigger and there was and you started realizing that the people that you're training with are now kind of professional fighters. It's going beyond just like the little small group of you guys. How did you process that, or was it just like another day in the office for you?
Well, I had a few fights in Vegas, and that was kind of like doing anything in a casino in Vegas and the bright lights and everything kind of gets your attention. Um, that's probably when I started realizing that there was something to it, and the people that were in attendance at the fights, you know, it wasn't just like uh I don't know, the regular people, some regular people, but there were movie stars and celebrities and stuff in the audience, and like, why are they coming to see a fight card that I'm fighting on, stuff like that. Um, but then, Chuck's rise to fame and the path that he took between everything before and then when the Ultimate Fighter hit and all that. I mean, it was a gradual thing, but in hindsight, it seems like it happened really quick, but it wasn't fast. It was really gradual.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, as far as like when did I realize that when you start meeting and training with people that you've known as like famous martial artists, and now you're training with them, now you're having lunch with them. Um, that's pretty cool, you know? And when your skills and your training methods and what you're putting into it are actually garnering like a mutual respect instead of just a one-way admiration, then you know that that the dues you've been paying has been worth it. Um, so yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, it does. It does. So really, from the sounds of it, because the training was done the way it was and the environment that you're in, and it was gradual, sounds like you really didn't notice. Like you kind of noticed, you kind of saw it, but the
Well,
idea.
I guess it's a matter of what aspect of it. If you're talking about the training, that's one aspect of it. If you're talking about the fame, um, because there's different levels of success, right? There's success of being in great shape and being able to hold down a regular 9 to 5 job while you're training and while you have a good family and while your kids are happy. That's success. There's doing all that and going after a title. There's defending yourself in a bad situation. I mean, really, to be honest, the situations I've gotten into, where I've had to use my training to help people and save people in bad situations, that is more of uh, my that has affected my ability to really um, recognize the value of my training more than the fame and the fighters and stuff. I know the name of of the show today is about being in a fight team, but the for me my level of success has been measured by the effect I've had in other people's lives, and you know that's how it is.
Yeah, and one of the things that comes to mind. Um, so a few weeks ago, there's this thing. I'm in Japan. I live in Japan. For those of you who if this is your first episode, and once a month, one of my friends who's a professional promoter out here in Japan, will have this meet where where different kickboxing teams and MMA teams will get together and cross train, all ages, from kids to adults, even some older guys will be there. And one of my older students, he's in his 50s and he's a police officer, and he came in and he finally showed up because he didn't want to go to it. I'm like, you should come, man. It's fun. It's not what you think it is. It's not that intimidating. I know it sounds intimidating when I say there's going to be professional fighters there, but I'm telling you, alongside these professional fighters, I also saw a 75-year-old karate instructor who's retired, And he every time I spar with him, he wants to go light. So I'm telling you, there's a place for everybody here. You just don't be afraid. They're not going any harder than we've gone in our gym. So he finally comes out, and I get done with one of the professional fighters, and I say, hey, you should spar him. He's like, I'm not gonna spar him. I don't want to spar a professional fighter. I'm like, I'm telling you, man, like, he's a nice guy. You'll enjoy it. You'll have fun. Don't be intimidated by this. It's nothing scary. And so he finally listened to me. He's like, okay, I'll do it. And he gets in there, and he got done with house. Are you okay? You're like, any broken bones, any bruises? Like, no, it was fun. I'm like, I told you, man, like, it's not this, you got this thing in your head where, because they're a professional fighter, I wouldn't say you should spar him if I didn't think you were capable of keeping up with him, or that he's going to hurt you. I would never put you in that situation. And he knew I wouldn't put him in that situation, but I think in his own head, he was trying to figure out whether he could keep up. The guy was young. I'm asking him to spar a 35-year-old current champion out here. So like, right. So he's in his head, he's just wondering. So like, I guess what I'm asking you is, for your average person that's not from the pit, that didn't have that kind of training the whole time, for them, maybe they do find themselves intimidated by that prospect, or maybe they want that for some reason. What would you say to someone like that?
I have students like that now. The town where my school is in Malibu, California, is not a hard town. It's not a rough town. I'll just say that I have some tough students, and not all of them were as tough and confident as they are now when they started. And I have some new students, adults and children, that often hear me say, "You're not made of glass," or that their parents will often hear me say, he or she is not made of glass. They need to learn what they're capable of, and watch the confidence and the pride that comes once they realize that they can do this and this and this. But what you're saying is totally true. They come in and they think that they can't do it. Not like you're a good teacher. John's a good teacher. I try to be a good teacher. I'm not going to overwhelm a student, but the first time an adult is told, put the gloves on, let's go, they're scared. Usually they're scared. Or it's the other way around. They walk in and they go, I want to spar with you. And it turns into that macho fest thing. But it seems like it's always like one way or the other. Every once in a while, you'll get someone that's just like down the middle. And, but yeah, good. Well, they're there for a reason, they're, if they're there because they're really afraid, like I've had tactical police officers that are in charge of teaching tactical to their department come in and say, I'm in charge of tactical training for this department. I've never been in a fight in my life. I need to know what it's like. I need to know how this goes, how this works, because I don't feel right, teaching da 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 da. So yeah, he was honest about the fact that he was really scared, but he wanted to know what it was like because he thought it was his job to know. So
you'd be surprised how many times I've heard that.
Yeah.
That exact same thing you just said. I've had so many people from law enforcement, even military. I had a guy from the head commander of military police, and he comes in and he's just like, I really want to have a better idea of what it's like to do hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah.
And I want to spar you to see what that's like. And after we were done sparring, he's a young kid. He's like 28, 29. I'm 40 something. And when we were done, I'm not trying to ego boost or anything, but when we were done, all I'll say is when we were done, he said, I want to really figure out what just happened and how I can do that. It was exactly how he put it in Japanese. He's like, I'm trying to figure out how is it that I teach hand to hand, and we even did like a tactical training drill where we were doing knife. So we both had knives, and it didn't turn out well for him. And he was very he wasn't angry, just really super confused. And
but for a good person who cares, which I'm sure he is, because why else would he be seeking it out? Can you imagine how much that stuck in his brain when he went home that night? How much it bothered him?
Oh yeah,
his conscience.
Yeah, that's what he was saying. He didn't even wait to get home. He told me right away. He's like, this really it really bothers me that there's this gap between what I'm teaching and what just happened. And I told him, and Kajikum's got the knife tricks and stuff. And so, can you show me some knife tricks? I'm like, those, to be honest, those are tricks. What it really looks nothing like that. And so, but again, people come with an idea, and it's funny that I love what you said, the two extremes. You have the guy who comes in and they want to spar you because they're already in a fight team or whatever, and they're just kind of trying to test the waters. And then you have the guy who's terrified to fight, like, and the guy in the middle. I know you said, hey, sometimes the guy in the middle shows up. I don't know about you, man. That guy in the middle hardly ever shows up. I hardly ever
No,
have
no,
they're hardly ever
he's a
there.
rare bird. He's a rare bird for sure.
That is a very rare individual right there that comes in balance.
I can think of a couple. I can think of a couple in the 17 years my school's been open. I can think of a couple.
Yeah, right.
Not rare.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I've been teaching for about 15 years. Oh, yeah, definitely. I can't even get. I think I can only think of like one. So, like, for me, and so like, yeah, it's always the extremes. There's always that extreme. Either they're going too hard, and they want to be oh man, I want to be a professional. And like, you get this, I'm sure, because you have the pit, you have that whole brand behind you. And John talks about this. People coming in because they want to be professional fighters because they heard about the pit. Those are the worst. in my history, those are the kid that comes in saying, I want to be a professional MMA fighter. How much
There's
fighting,
so much to that statement. There's so much like they want to be that, but they also, whether they realize it or not, they want it to happen in like 3 weeks.
yeah, I know, right? I was telling my wife, like, they're in some sort of rush that I don't really understand what they're rushing towards. Like, I don't know if they realize. I always ask them, like, have you ever fought before? Like, are you coming from another team? No. Have you ever trained before? I did some karate or some boxing. It's always like it's always under 3 months of training and something like that's very little, that has very little to do with MMA. And I'm like, all right, okay, so we need to start with like basics of boxing, basics of grappling. And okay, and you want to be a professional MMA fighter? Yes. Okay. All right. All right. And then the training starts, and they're always like, so when am I going to get my next fight? When the guys are fighting? I heard the guys saying they're gonna be at a tournament. Can I join them? I'm like, those guys have been training for like 3 years. You've been training for like a month.
You can see when people are like, I don't understand, and you start breaking it down on the dues that have to be paid, that those guys that have been training for 3 years, all the dues they've paid, you can see them, and it's kind of sad. Like, you have to be careful how you break it to them, because you see them getting sad, like, oh,
Yeah.
it can't happen fast.
I
know.
thought I was gonna be in the cage, like, I don't know, in 3 months.
Well, that's the other thing too about MMA, is like, going back to your other question, MMA now is a noun. It's a thing. It exists. When we were coming up, it didn't exist. We were boxing and doing Muay Thai fights. We were ramping up like this. So we didn't have like a thing like a yellow brick road to take us to the wizard and have that destination in our mind. Our destination was just getting better. That was our destination. And it the history is, what it is, but now it's almost a burden for these people to have to like think about that instead of just training. Just train, just have a goal, like protecting your family, be healthy. That's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know if it comes with being old. I look. People say I look young. I'm 42. I'm not. I know you're. I know you're older than me. I know you're older than me.
I don't know anything about. Talk to John. Talk to John. I don't know about the old thing.
But I can tell you that I never had aspirations to be a professional fighter. I ended up doing it, but it wasn't on the roster. My instructor never pushed me towards it. I didn't come from the kind of environment that John came. My instructor was not a professional fighter. So the goal was always just defending yourself. So when I see these kids coming in now, again, they're always looking at the finished product. So they're already looking at the wall. They see some of the people I've trained. They see some people with championship belts and boxing and stuff. And they think like, yeah, I put it up there just so that they know that I'm not bullshitting them. But like, but it's not to be like, hey, I want you to do this. It's just to let you know that's possible. But for that kid that comes in that wants to be it's a total different goal. And I always tell them, like, how are things going in sparring right now? Like right now, against, you're 20, you're 19 years old, and I just had you spar my 52-year-old police officer who's in your weight class. How'd that go? Were you dominating? Did you feel did you feel you were in control of that? Like, no, I was getting my ass kicked. Then the most likely that's what's going to look like yeah, that's what you're rushing towards right now. Come back to me when you feel you're not scared in that situation, in a light context. So like,
Yeah.
I always tell them, like, and they'll come in, it's like, oh, I want to be a pro fighter. He's going to be a pro fighter. And then the other guys, their friends that recommended him, he said he wanted to be a pro fighter. When do you think he's going to get in there? I'm like, I'm glad you're excited. Don't lose that excitement. But, it's going to take some time. He's got a lot of training to do. just enjoy the training. Enjoy the training is what I would tell anyone. So before we wrap up, you kind of touched on it a little bit, and we're touching on it right now. The idea of doing martial arts because you enjoy the training, And anybody who's watching this, I'd probably use a thumbnail that had a bunch of pro fighters on there. If they stuck around this long in the conversation, the reason I wanted to share this with you all is this concept of, I mean, how long do you plan on doing what you're doing? Like, me and Rick are both telling you, like, our generation did not have a yellow brick road. There was no UFC champions. UFC was, you came along before the UFC. I got into this as the UFC was coming up, and I just saw the UFC as I thought it was an illegal, but I saw I have said this on the last 2 episodes. When I first saw the first VHS video of the UFC, I thought it was an illegal fight. I'm like, whoa, what are you showing me? Were you allowed to be like watching this? Like, so it wasn't what it is now. So for you new generation martial artists, I guess, why are you doing this? And then I'm just going to grab this question and throw it right back at Rick. Why do you keep doing this? What keeps you going in back in and training? What keeps you teaching? What is your goal at this point?
Well, I'm teaching, so I have to integrate running a business in a school. But the one thing, the old saying, like, getting your black belt's just the beginning. We've all heard that. When you have a group of people that are all getting together at this one place, like, it could be people of different political deals, different whatever. They could all have completely different lives, but for whatever reason, they all want to be at this one place to train in this one activity, under probably this one instructor. So they all have enough things in common that they agree on that. They could disagree on everything else. And if they're all there because they want to get better, which probably is another common denominator, especially the more time goes on, the people that are left, that are still there, obviously are there because they want to get better. So that time distills all of that down to your core people that really want to do it. So when you have that kind of community of people that are there for that reason, it becomes pretty easy to be motivated by them. And I'm not just talking about other black belts. I'm talking about white belts. I'm talking about anyone that's on the mat that wants to train and challenge themselves, is open to ideas, but also open to share. That kind of community is limitless. It's limitless. Every day I walk on the mat with my students, and I have a small school. I don't have a ton of students. It doesn't matter. It could be a 6-year-old that teaches me something. He or she could teach me that they were having a difficulty with this part of the technique versus someone else that was learning the technique had a different problem. It could be I'm trying to communicate to them what they need to do and they're not understanding. I mean, I had some kids that thought the ball of their foot was their heel because it looks more like a ball than the ball of your foot. I had been saying the ball of your foot for years and not understanding why these kids are like spinning on their heels, right? And I mean, that's one like really simple analogy, but you're surrounding yourselves with people that want to learn and want to progress and want to persevere and believe in the possibilities that we have, and to do all that along with the rest of life in the crazy world we live in, that's still a priority to them. I don't want to not have those kind of people around me. I don't want to have, that's a martial artist. Why would I want to not be around those kind of people? You know, I'll be doing it till I'm in the dirt. And that's the main reason why. The other thing that I'll interject is I had trained with a lot of different people, and some of the other instructors whose schools I went to that day are still training and run really successful schools with great students. John was the instructor that I needed. On that day, that was the instructor that I needed, and I've stuck with him ever since, and I'll always be with him. But he might not be the right person for other people. So I think the style is really important. I think the instructor is really important, and along with, you know, of course, all the values and everything that are incorporated into the art and the teacher. But having those like-minded people that are dedicated to growth and perseverance, I think, is the one main thing that keeps me going. You know, I want to be able to protect my family. It's paid off. I have been able to do things that have benefited other people and myself with my training. But what kept me going wasn't, I want to know how to do that. It was, I want to be around people that want to grow.
And then my final question, maybe it should have been my first question because it is the title of the show. What is what is your advice for someone who does walk into a place that has a pro fight team and they're a beginner and they're in a different situation from me and you because the Yellow Brick Road is paved and the wizard
Right,
is right there and all the
right.
and all the people that they're looking up to are right there in the room with them. What is your advice to that person as far as being able to survive that environment, enjoy that environment, and thrive in it? What would be your advice for them?
We always had fun at John's, even when I was getting my ass handed to me. We were always laughing. We were always telling jokes. Um, uh, it felt good to be there. So when I have students or prospective students or parents come in and they're asking all the questions, you know, what are the classes like? They're trying to paint a picture in their head of what it's going to be like to be there. And I know that they're asking questions like, do you do this? Do you do that? How many women are there? All the kind of, and I'll say, I understand that you want to know what it's like to be here. And I think the reason that you want to know that is you want to know how it's going to feel to be here. None of the answers I give you right now are going to mean anything. I can give you all the right answers to all your questions, and it sounds good and it looks good on paper. But if you come in and it doesn't feel good, if it's not a place that you want to return to, you're not going to. And then you're going to miss out on all of the benefits that come from our training that I honestly believe in. So come in, check it out, come in for a week or two, do the classes, meet the different people that are here, see how you feel, and then that's going to decide it for you. Um, as far as like, yeah, I mean, I guess it's different advice. John would be a better person to answer, like for someone who wants to be an MMA fighter. But as far as like going into a school that has MMA fighters or doesn't, that my suggestion still stands on in either way. You know, either way, I think it needs to be a place that you want to return to, and you don't even have to like psychoanalyze why you want to return to it. It just feels good, unless you're like some weirdo or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The instructor was kind of hot. I want to go back because if it's something like that. But if it's like, if you're going there because some people want to lose weight, some people want to gain confidence, some people want to build a social group of people that are going to encourage them to do good things. Everyone has different reasons. That's what I was getting at earlier. Everyone has different reasons to want to be there. So that's cool. We don't need to analyze that. But when you go, is it a place that you want to go back? And hopefully they're teaching some sound martial arts, but nothing's permanent. Maybe you do something for a while like I did, and then that makes you realize, oh, I have this hole in my game. Maybe I'm gonna start doing that. John started boxing because of an injury, and that changed the whole direction of his career. I've done similar things. I've had injuries where I've started doing other arts and incorporated it into the Kempo with Eskrima and stuff. And that was out of necessity because of injuries. So you never know what path it's going to go, but I've always made sure that it felt good. Like, why would I do anything that didn't feel good? So I really think I don't know what kind of an argument there could be for that.
Yeah, no, and
Against that, I mean.
no, I've interviewed over 100 martial artists now, and I've asked them the question about what would you recommend to someone for training and what they should do. And over 100 of them have all touched on the same thing. Are you having fun? Did you enjoy the environment? Did you get along well with your instructor?
Yeah,
Um,
right.
and it doesn't have to be stellar. Like again, your perspective, right? Did you get along well with your instructor? Well, you got along well with your instructor, but apparently your instructor didn't like you, right? So so it really does come down to perspective. I know I've come to look. One of the best kickboxing coaches in my life hated me. I know he hated me. He never told me he hated me, but I knew he hated me. But I got some great training out of it.
Or he didn't hate you, because I didn't know John didn't like me, and he didn't. So you never know.
Yeah, maybe he didn't hate me. Maybe he didn't hate me. He had a weird way of showing me that he didn't hate me. Let's put it that way. He made me sit there for a month. He would only let me spar because he knew I had a fight coming up. But as far as training me was concerned, he wouldn't, because it's in Japan, and he decided to do the whole Mr. Miyagi thing, and he made me just sit there and do a jab straight. That was my training, was shadow boxing and a jab straight for hours on end until the balls of my feet. We did it barefoot on it was on glass. No, I'm just kidding. He had a regular mat, but he made me do it in the same spot so long that the bottom of my feet, the skin peeled off. And I was like, should I stop? He's like, nope. I'm like, I had a feeling you'd say that, and I kept going. Bloody feet. And I was like, after we got done with that month, I guess I finally earned his respect. But but it was that, and then sparring, and then during sparring, I just took it out on all his guys. Like, I feel sorry. I still feel sorry for his students that had to spar me, because I was angry about about having to do a jab straight for a whole month.
All your pent up energy and anger and everything.
Yeah. But the point of that is, I still enjoyed it for all that was worth. Even if you think the guy doesn't like you, I enjoyed it. Like I would go back home and laugh. My wife didn't see the joke, the punchline of the joke, but I did. I did, and I enjoyed it. So for those of you watching, again, he's touching on stuff that if you've seen my show, you've heard before. If you enjoy the environment, you enjoy the training, you want to come back to that place, then it's only going to help you. It's only going to help you. And then I hope any of you watching also, I don't know how many of you watch this that are the kind of person that we talked about that just is in a rush, is in a weird rush to become a professional fighter. I don't know how many of those people out there, but if you are in that rush, just settle down and take your time. There's no rush.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, live in the moment. That's where you're going to learn stuff. You're not going to learn everything there is to learn by just focusing on what's at the end. You're learning now. So, yeah.
Well, Rick, thank you so much for coming on the show. For my listeners, one of these podcasts once a week, sometimes twice. Keep an eye out for that. And Social Jello with Angelo podcast, Conversations with a Back Fist. Share with your friends, hit like and subscribe. That helps quite a bit. And we'll catch you all next time.